Back on the News VPN, thanks for staying on. This week, Operation Dudula marched to the offices of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa in what they called a march against organizations they call unpatriotic. SERI and various other human rights organizations have called the protest misguided and condemned the group's actions. For more on this, I'm joined by Nomzamo Zondo, who is the Executive Director for SERI. Nomzamo, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. Are you an unpatriotic organization?
Good afternoon, Thabo. I doubt it. One of the things that SERI says at its core is the love that it has for this country and the people who live in this country. We've worked for 15 years to support poor people in different situations who are struggling with housing or with accessing livelihoods. I think of all the definitions I can find, unpatriotic doesn't sit well with SERI.
What did you make the decision, as opposed to receive the grouping that came there and to take their memorandum?
Thabo, SERI has worked consistently with many groups who use the right to protest as a way to communicate their dissent. We believe that the right to protest is one of the most accessible ways for people to address people in power. We wouldn't consider ourselves people with power, but we felt that we should hear Operation Dudula out. And in fact, on the day, even the chairperson of our board had left his business to come and receive a memorandum or petition from Operation Dudula, but would not receive one.
And why would you think they would, I suppose, make such a call about you and actually want to take it to your doorstep?
Look, as our client, Zondo explains, many of us are unhappy with the conditions in the country. We are unhappy with the rampant unemployment, with poverty, with the inability for people to afford basic foodstuffs. And so we can understand that Dudula can be frustrated about those conditions. And we understand that they see migrants as the root cause of those frustrations, which is where we disagree. So we feel they're misguided in seeing them as this silver bullet that will solve the many crises that we're dealing with in education, in healthcare, in housing. But we've, even taking that into account, we felt that at the core of the case that had was the background behind this discontent is a call to say to every person of African descent, you have a right to exist, and you have a right to be treated with dignity, and you have a right to access all the things that human beings need to exist. And we felt that first the case communicated this, and that this march by Operation Dudula would then give us an opportunity, if not on the day of the march, much later on, we could just simply explain where our clients are coming from with their call against xenophobia. Why our clients disagree.
Yeah, they're looking at all the cases, I suppose, that you particularly represent, but this time around they are summing them all up. They are saying your moves, or at least the cases that you challenge, demonstrate that you are unpatriotic and you are protecting illegal foreigners at the expense of South Africans.
So that's the thing that's difficult, Thabo, because in the groups that we represent in the case, we represent Abahlali baseMjondolo, who has a membership of over 180,000 people living in South Africa. The overwhelming majority of those people are South Africans. In that group, there was the Inner City Federation, similar situation, and many other groups who are represented by SERI outside of this case. So in as much as they might have a complaint that in the work that SERI does, it protects migrants, and in this specific case, against their violence and their intimidation. But broadly, even in cases where migrants, for instance, might be active in the informal economy, our work would protect them. That is a fact, that is true. But that does not give them a license to then say SERI is unpatriotic. It actually, they should acknowledge, as the crowd that received them on the day communicates, SERI is motivated by feelings of love, is motivated by deep respect for our constitution, which is actually the one thing that defines what it is to be South African. To be South African is to make sure that you not lead with discrimination, that you do not other people who you do not understand and you do not know. In effect, our constitution sets out that you should not discriminate on the basis of where people come from. So in doing that work, the work that we've been doing, been consistent both in affirming the values contained in our constitution, but secondly, also living out the way that we'd like to be treated, that our clients would like to be treated. In fact, when we launched the case, one of the things that we did, we wrote to all of our allies and we said to them, at the core of this case is the demand for humanity that many of our clients demand every day, from our clients in Marikana to our clients in the Royal Western Cape.
Now, one of your clients, abahlali basemjondolo, of course, that you've represented in a number of cases, came out in your defense, blocking the marches of Operation Dudula. Do you think this now sets them up on a collision course and there'll be tensions?
So the first thing, Thabo, is that Operation Dudula was not blocked. I was present outside the offices that we rent in Braamfontein. When the Operation Dudula march arrived, the deputy president of abahlali basemjondolo ordered everyone to sit down so that the marchers from Operation Dudula could come in and see everyone. And we as the leadership were in front. So if they wanted to engage us, they could have engaged us. If they wanted to submit their petition, they would have submitted their petition. But at the core of this is this idea that anyone who speaks in defense of migrant rights, anyone who demands that there must be dignity for migrants is themselves unpatriotic, is the reason why the Dudula says they were blocked, firstly. And the reason why there's this idea that there's a collision course. There is no collision course, it's just two separate sides. There's a side that insists on a shared humanity, on love, on living the principles of Ubuntu. And there's a side that thinks that all of the problems we have in South Africa are caused by the 4 million or less migrants who live here. It's just those two different sides. And of course, unfortunately, in the engagement after Dudula decided to use violence against the extremely peaceful crowd that was outside the offices of SERI, they've also now sent death threats to abahlali. They've even gone as far as we saw in a press statement this morning to even intimidate abahlali members and saying, we wish that each of you would be necklaced, each single member would be necklaced, and that's how they would disappear. So probably there is now a space where it would be difficult for the two organizations to engage, but also it would be important for me to point out that before the protest, abahlali had reached out to Operation Dudula and had even offered to travel to Johannesburg and meet with them. So the collision course wasn't always the only option available. And I know, because I know the leadership of abahlali, even as we speak now, even with what has happened on Thursday, with what has happened since Thursday, abahlali would be open to engaging Operation Dudula and would be open to explaining why they have since 2008 been actively calling people out on xenophobia.
Yeah. Are you, as SERI, concerned at all, intimidated at all by what is quoted here, is the utterance of the president of Operation Dudula, who was notably, they say, upset about not being allowed inside the offices and was heard saying, we will come back here and close these offices?
One, as I've said, SERI has in the last 15 years represented protesters. In fact, the reason I got this job is because I identified as a protester. And no protester has ever insisted that they must go inside someone's offices, firstly. But secondly, we're not intimidated by the threat of saying they'll close us down, because we existed for about 12 years before Dudula was even formed, firstly. But secondly, even beyond that, SERI's work supports thousands of people living in South Africa. And it's impossible that an organization like Dudula can just decide to shut us down. But then lastly, the one thing that concerns us is the continued death threats, the death threats that were made to us, to our staff on the day of the protests, including me, the death threats that are being made on social media, on emails, on telephone calls, stuff. That concerns us, because those threats are the ones that could result in something that is catastrophic. And at this point, we are calling on Operation Dudula, which sets itself up as a military organization, to exercise some control, exercise some authority over its membership. And in as far as it wants to engage SERI, again, they still have the telephone numbers that they have from us, the email addresses. They can still send us an email and engage us, but they should not be making any threats. And we will take steps to ensure that there's accountability for any threats that have made against our staff and against people that are around us.
What is common ground? How do you find common ground in this particular instance? You've got Dudula on the one side saying you are advocating for the rights of foreigners at the expense of locals. You, on the other hand, you're saying you're weaponizing these issues to justify breaking the law and violating the rights of other groupings. Where is the common ground?
I honestly, Thabo, I cannot give you the common ground now. But I think what the one common ground that I know was always available was engagement. We were willing to listen to them. I think if they approach us and if there are guarantees that there will be peace, that there will be no thirst, there will be no intimidation, maybe there can be a conversation. But in as far as there's a demand for SERI to stop doing the work that it has been doing for over a decade, I think that's unlikely to change. And if Dudula cannot accept that, then maybe we'll continue to sit on different sides of the table.
The litigation that you have launched, are they going ahead?
Look, we are waiting for judgment out of the Gauteng High Court, and our sense was that partially that the march was about the fact that judgment is probably coming at any point. Operation Dudula had intentionally stayed away from that litigation, which we assume then that would mean that they would then respect whatever outcome comes out of it. At this point, we do not know. I think the jury is out on that, but we will make sure that when we get the judgment, if there is an interdict against Operation Dudula, we will enforce that interdict, and we suspect that in any event that those would be our instructions.
Nomzamo, appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on. Nomzamo Zondo, Executive Director at SERI there on that march on Thursday.